Hey everyone. Tonight we were traveling back to a world wrapped in snow, to the frozen edges of medieval Europe where survival was never guaranteed and where even the smallest spark of warmth could mean life or death. This is the story of the women who carried life through winter, through hunger, sickness, and the long silence of nights when the wind crept under every door. Imagine a small cottage at the edge of a village. The roof sags under snow, the air smells of wood smoke and damp wool, and in the flicker of firelight, a mother rests her hands over a quiet heartbeat beneath layers of rough-spun cloth. Outside, the world is silent, fields frozen, rivers still. But inside, a different kind of endurance burns. Midwives whisper prayers, water warms in iron pots, and time itself slows as another life prepares to enter a world still locked in ice. There were no doctors, no comfort, only faith, courage, and the gentle knowledge passed from one generation to the next. Every breath, every ember, every prayer was an act of defiance. Proof that even in the coldest season, life refused to stop. So before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you enjoy these quiet journeys into the past. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always amazing to see how far this circle of night listeners reaches. Now close your eyes, listen to the wind outside your window, and let us drift back to a time when warmth was a miracle, and courage looked like a mother tending a fire through the longest winter night. The midwinter silence. The world outside was frozen white, a vast, desolate expanse stretching endlessly under an immense pale sky. This was the unyielding grip of a medieval midwinter, where the cold permeated every fibre of existence and the snow, thick and unmoving, muffled every sound. Within the small, mud-daubed hut, the air hung heavy and still, thick with the earthy scent of mud brick, wood smoke, and the subtle tang of human presence. And at its heart, the fire whispered like a fragile promise, a tiny, defiant heartbeat against the overwhelming, lethal silence that pressed in from all sides. Imagine the air, sharp and brutal, stealing your breath with every inhale, stinging any exposed skin with its icy bite. The sky above was often a vast, unbroken expanse of bruised grey, heavy with the promise of more snow, or, on rarer days, a startling, crystalline blue that seemed to amplify the sheer scale of the cold. The sun, if it showed at all, was a weak, indifferent eye, offering little warmth, only a stark illumination of the frozen landscape. Your body, heavy with the growing life within, felt every nuance of this pervasive cold. Sleep was shallow, restless, punctuated by shivers and aches, the persistent gnawing of hunger in your belly. The straw beneath you, usually a source of some dry comfort, now felt like ice, its brittle stalks radiating a biting chill that seeped into your very bones through layers of coarse wool and rough linen. Listen to the profound, almost oppressive silence of this frozen world. The thick blanket of snow, perpetually renewed, absorbed every sound, from the whisper of the wind to the distant creak of trees. No birds sang now, no insects buzzed. It was a dead silence, broken only by the muffled crunch of your husband Ah's footsteps on the snow as he ventured out, or the distant, mournful howl of a wolf, its hunger sharpened by the unforgiving season. Within the small hut, the fire whispered like a fragile promise. Its flames, carefully tended and kept low to conserve precious fuel, danced a subdued ballet of orange and red against the rough timber beams, casting dancing shadows that seemed to sway with the profound stillness. Its warmth, however minimal, was the central anchor of your existence, a physical and psychological bulwark against the invading cold. Your fellow villagers, isolated in their own small huts, were invisible. The paths between dwellings were buried under deep snow, making travel arduous and dangerous. Each cottage became an island of fragile warmth in a vast, silent sea of white, its inhabitants clinging to life, waiting for the elusive promise of spring. The emotional weight of the midwinter silence was immense. It amplified the constant anxieties, the scarcity of food, the ever-present threat of illness, the fear for the fragile life growing within you. But in its profound stillness, there was also a quiet, almost sacred intimacy, a shared understanding of enduring hardship, a deep connection to the beating heart of your own small family. The world outside is frozen white, and inside the small hut, the fire whispers like a fragile promise. The midwinter silence was the terrifying beginning of the journey for pregnant women, a profound and horrifying reality that tested the endurance of every human breath. It was a softly haunting, tender descent into a frozen world, charting the unseen courage of women who carried life through a season built for death, where the faint echo of survival was whispered through countless cold nights beneath the profound, all-encompassing stillness. The weight of expectation. As the midwinter silence gripped the world outside, turning every landscape into a frozen tableau, the life within the small, mud-daubed hut took on an amplified significance. For a pregnant woman, this was not just a season of cold, it was a profound, internal struggle against lethal forces underscored by the immense weight of expectation. Every movement felt heavier in the cold. Breath fogs, the air joints ache, and the body works twice as hard to keep warm, nurturing not just one life, but two, a tender sacrifice in a season built for death. Imagine the air inside, thick with the earthy scent of mud brick, wood smoke, and the subtle tang of human presence, now permeated by a profound chill that clung to every surface. The sounds were no longer the simple crackle of a thriving fire. They included the low, rhythmic breathing of a family huddled close, the soft rustle of straw, and the subtle groan of your own body moving with increased effort. Candlelight trembling in drafty huts, illuminated faces etched with weariness and a quiet, profound hope. Your body, already heavy with the growing life within, felt every nuance of the pervasive cold with an almost unbearable intensity. The demands on your internal resources were immense. Not only did your body have to maintain its own core temperature against the lethal chill, but it also had to generate and protect the precious warmth of the unborn child, a constant double burden that sapped your strength. Listen to your own ragged breathing, the air sharp and cold, turning white as your breath fogs the air with every exhale. Hear the subtle creak of your joints protesting every movement, rising from the straw bed, bending to tend the fire, reaching for a precious piece of bread. See your swollen belly, a profound symbol of the life within. Now, an added weight, making every step, every shift, a conscious, arduous effort. Joints ache. The damp cold aggravated old pains, settling into knees, hips and lower back, transforming simple movements into a battle. The energy required to move your heavy pregnant form was immense, drawing deeply from a body already struggling with chronic malnutrition and the physiological demands of gestation, and the body works twice as hard to keep warm. Your metabolism, already elevated to support the growing fetus, had to strain even harder to generate sufficient heat against the penetrating cold. This was a ceaseless, invisible struggle, consuming precious calories that were already in desperately short supply during the lean winter months. Every flicker of warmth, every piece of extra clothing, every shared body heat was vital, not just for you, but for the fragile life within. The emotional weight of expectation was profound. The survival of your child was paramount, not just for your own heart, but for the future of your family, your lineage. In a world of high infant mortality, where winter was a notorious killer, carrying a child to term and bringing it through its first, most vulnerable months was a profound, terrifying gamble. The midwinter silence outside amplified this internal struggle, making the hut feel like a crucible of life and death. The distant church bell tolling through mist became a constant, mournful reminder of the fragility of existence. Every movement feels heavier in the cold, breath fogs the air, joints ache, and the body works twice as hard to keep warm. The weight of expectation was a terrifying, profound reality for pregnant women in medieval winter, a chilling testament to the unseen courage of women who carried life through a season built for death. It was a softly haunting, tender descent into a frozen world, charting the enduring strength of fragile lives beneath the frost, forever tethered to the relentless demands of new life. The straw bed. In the bone-chilling depths of a medieval winter, where the cold permeated every fibre of existence and the very earth radiated lethal chill, the peasant's bed was far more than a place of rest. It was a fundamental tool of survival. For a pregnant woman, whose body worked tirelessly to sustain two lives, the straw bed was a profound, often uncomfortable sanctuary. Layers of wool and straw formed the only barrier between a mother and the earth's relentless chill. She dreams of spring, of light, of warmth, of a time when the cold's insidious grip would finally recede, a tender hope woven into the very fabric of her fragile sleep. Imagine the air inside the hut, thick with the earthy scent of mud brick, the comforting aroma of wood smoke, and the subtle tang of human presence, now permeated by the dry, sweet smell of straw. The sounds were no longer just the crackle of fire. They included the soft, rhythmic rustle of the straw beneath worn blankets, the gentle breathing of a family huddled close, and the profound, comforting hum of collective life. Candlelight trembling in drafty huts illuminated a world utterly dependent on its fragile warmth and the natural insulation it provided. Your bed was typically a large, communal pallet on the packed earth floor, sometimes a shallow depression or a simple wooden frame. But its essence was the thick, generous layer of straw, hay, or dried bracken that filled it. This plant material, painstakingly gathered after the harvest, was the primary insulating layer, chosen for its abundance, its lightness, and its remarkable ability to trap air, creating a thermal buffer against the cold, damp earth. Listen to the soft, rhythmic rustle of the straw beneath worn blankets as bodies shifted, settling into its contours. Hear the low murmur of conversation as a family arranged themselves, seeking the deepest, warmest pockets. See the thick layers of straw, perhaps a foot or more deep, forming a resilient mound on the floor, providing a vital separation from the lethal chill of the ground. Above the straw, crude coverings of rough linen or worn woolen blankets were placed. These were often patched, threadbare, and smelled faintly of sheep and countless nights, but their coarse fabric provided additional insulation. More importantly, they held the straw in place, preventing it from scattering too widely, ensuring its insulating power remained concentrated. The cold, however, was a persistent adversary. It found its way in through any gap in the coverings, seeped from the damp ground, and settled in the open spaces of the cottage. But the straw, with its thousands of tiny air pockets, created a surprisingly effective barrier. It prevented the direct transfer of lethal cold from the earth to the human body, transforming an otherwise deadly sleeping surface into something remotely habitable, crucial for the pregnant body. However, the bed of straw came with its own set of challenges. It was a haven for fleas and lice, whose relentless bites would interrupt precious sleep, adding another layer of irritation to the struggle for rest. The straw itself would eventually grow damp from condensation, from shared breaths, from any minor leaks in the thatch, requiring regular replenishment, a laborious task in the depths of winter. She dreams of spring, of light. Even in the depths of exhaustion, the mind would escape, conjuring visions of a warmer world, dreams of green fields, of abundant harvests, of a sun that truly warmed the skin, of a time when the cold's grip would finally recede. These were not just idle fantasies, they were powerful psychological anchors, sustaining hope, fueling the profound desire for survival. Layers of wool and straw form the only barrier between a mother and the earth's chill. She dreams of spring, of light. The straw bed was a pervasive, fundamental reality for pregnant women in medieval winter, transforming their raw ingenuity into the very means of defying a lethal environment. It was a softly haunting, tender descent into a frozen world, charting the unseen courage of women who carried life through a season built for death forever, tethered to the fragile warmth of their earthy bed and the enduring hope for spring's gentle embrace. The fire that must not die. In the bone-chilling depths of a medieval winter, where the cold permeated every fibre of existence and threatened to steal the very breath from human bodies, fire was more than a convenience. It was the sacred beating heart of the peasant's home, the absolute centre of survival. The fire that must not die was a profound, unyielding command. Someone must always tend the embers. A single night without flame could mean frostbite, or worse, transforming the fragile sanctuary of the hut into a tomb, a constant, pervasive fear that underscored the immense, silent courage of women carrying new life. Imagine the air inside the hut, thick with the pungent aroma of wood smoke, mingled with the earthy scent of mud brick, damp straw, and the subtle tang of human presence. The sounds were no longer the simple crackle of a roaring fire. They included the soft hiss of dwindling embers, the anxious whispers of the fire tender, and the profound, almost eerie silence of a hearth fighting for life. Candlelight trembling in draughty huts, now replaced by the faintest glow from deep within the ashes, illuminated a world utterly dependent on its fragile warmth. The fire in the central hearth, carefully built within its stone pit, was meticulously managed. Fuel, precious and constantly scarce in winter, scraps of wood, peat, or dried dung, was added sparingly. The goal was not to maintain a roaring blaze throughout the night, but to preserve the glowing heart of the fire, its embers, until the morning, ensuring it could be easily rekindled without the arduous and cold task of striking a new spark. Listen to the soft, rhythmic breathing of the designated fire tender, often an elder or a particularly vigilant adult, their pregnant form hunched close to the hearth. Hear the gentle scrape of a crude stick or piece of wood, carefully raking the glowing embers into a compact pile. See the subtle movements of their hands, meticulously covering the hot coals with a thick layer of fine ash, insulating them, preserving their heat, allowing them to smoulder slowly, deeply through the long night. Someone must always tend the embers. The cold was insidious, an enemy that knew no surrender. It permeated the hut, testing the fire tender's endurance, tempting them with the seductive lure of sleep. They would shiver, huddle deeper into their rough wool, but their gaze remained fixed, unwavering. They understood the profound consequences of failure, the rapid onset of hypothermia for the sleeping group, the heightened danger from predators who feared no dark, the extinguishing of the family's very lifeline. A single night without flame could mean frostbite, or worse. Without the fire's warmth, the cottage would plunge into lethal cold within hours. Exposed skin could quickly succumb to frostbite, turning black, leading to agonizing loss of fingers or toes. For the very young, the very old, and for a pregnant woman already battling physiological demands, the complete absence of fire was a terrifying, almost certain death sentence. This vigil was both physically demanding and psychologically taxing. Hours stretched into what felt like an eternity, the passage of time marked only by the slow diminution of the embers and the increasing intensity of the cold. The fire tender fought against boredom, against the seductive pull of exhaustion, keeping their mind alert, constantly aware of the profound responsibility they bore for the fragile lives around them. The fire that must not die was a pervasive, fundamental reality for pregnant women in medieval winter, transforming their raw ingenuity into the very means of defying a lethal environment. It was a softly haunting, tender descent into a frozen world, charting the unseen courage of women who carried life through a season built for death, forever tethered to the enduring, life-giving flame, ensuring the torch of life was passed to another dawn, a profound secret of their survival against freezing dead. In the bone-chilling depths of a medieval winter, when the world outside was frozen white and the relentless cold gnawed at every body, sustenance was not a luxury, but an absolute, daily imperative. For a pregnant woman, already battling the immense physiological demands of carrying new life, this struggle was amplified. The thin gruel was a grim reality. Food was scarce, but the body must feed too. Warm broth, foraged herbs, and unwavering faith did what medicine often could not, a tender sacrifice in a season built for death, transforming meager rations into a profound act of love and desperate hope. Imagine the air inside the hut, thick with the earthy scent of mud brick, the pervasive aroma of wood smoke, and the subtle tang of human presence, now permeated by the comforting, if weak, aroma of simmering pottage. The sounds were no longer the simple crackle of a roaring fire. They included the contented sizzle of thin broth, the low murmur of hungry bellies, and the hushed voices of a family, their focus drawn to the warmth and promise of the meal. Candlelight trembling in draughty huts, illuminated faces etched with weariness, and a quiet, profound hope. The fire in the central hearth, carefully managed and kept low to conserve precious fuel, cooked the pottage in a heavy iron cauldron. But in winter, food was scarce. The harvest, long since gathered, was dwindling, and the relentless cold meant no fresh game, no available forage. The gruel was therefore thin, a watery broth made from dried peas, a few withered roots like turnip or parsnip, perhaps a handful of wild greens, and, if truly fortunate, a minuscule piece of cured pork fat, slowly rendered to add a whisper of richness. Listen to the contented sizzle of the pottage, its warm, earthy aroma filling the cottage, making hungry bellies ache with anticipation. Hear the sounds of chewing, deliberate and focused, as coarse bread was torn and dipped into the liquid. See the thin, steaming gruel being ladled into individual wooden bowls, its meager contents a stark reminder of their profound scarcity. Food is scarce, but the body must feed too. For a pregnant woman, this was the central, most agonizing struggle. Her body needed more calories, more nutrients, more warmth, not just for herself, but for the delicate life within. Yet the demands of the winter, the scarcity of resources, often made this impossible. She would often sacrifice her own portion or a significant part of it to ensure her husband had strength for work, or her existing children had enough to survive. Warm broth, herbs, and faith do what medicine cannot. The warm broth, however thin, provided crucial internal warmth, battling the cold that permeated her body. Foraged herbs, gathered in warmer months for their medicinal properties, might be added to the gruel, offering a hopeful, if unscientific, boost to health. And faith, unwavering and desperate, was her constant companion. She prayed ceaselessly for strength, for sustenance, for the miracle of a healthy birth. The psychological burden was immense. The gnawing hunger, amplified by the knowledge that another life depended on her, was a constant torment. Yet, within this profound struggle, there was a fierce, unwavering determination, a mother's primal will to protect and nurture. Food is scarce, but the body must feed too. Warm broth, herbs, and faith do what medicine cannot. The thin gruel was a pervasive, fundamental reality for pregnant women in medieval winter, transforming their raw ingenuity into the very means of defying a lethal environment. It was a softly haunting, tender descent into a frozen world, charting the unseen courage of women who carried life through a season built for death forever, tethered to the fragile warmth of shared hope and the enduring miracle of life beneath the frost. The village and the hearth, the women's circle, in the brutal, isolating grip of a medieval winter where the cold permeated every fibre of existence and the demands of pregnancy amplified every struggle, companionship was a vital lifeline. While men faced the frozen fields and distant dangers, women forged their own sanctuary within the village, a profound, unwritten code of mutual support. The women's circle was a sacred gathering. Neighbours gathered, sharing warmth, prayer, and whispered knowledge passed from one birth to the next, a tender web of endurance that defied the isolation and despair of a season built for death. Imagine the air inside a humble hut, thick with the earthy scent of mud brick, wood smoke, and the subtle tang of human presence, now permeated by the low murmur of female voices and the quiet hum of shared experience. The sounds were no longer the simple crackle of a lonely fire. They included the gentle rhythm of spinning wheels, the soft rustle of cloth, and the hushed comfort of women finding solace in each other's company. Candlelight trembling in draughty huts, illuminated faces etched with weariness, but softened by profound empathy. As winter deepened, and the men toiled in the frozen fields or sought scarce fuel, women's lives often became more confined to the village, to the warmth of their huts. Here, amidst the relentless cycle of domestic chores, they would gather, neighbours, friends, relatives, forming a silent, powerful network of support, particularly for those carrying new life. Listen to the low, melodic murmur of women's voices, their tones soft, reassuring, exchanging news, sharing anxieties, offering comfort. Hear the gentle, rhythmic hum of a spinning wheel, as fingers, calloused but deft, transformed raw wool into precious thread. See the circle of women, their bodies hunched against the cold, their hands busy with mending, weaving, or preparing meagre meals, their eyes meeting in silent understanding. Sharing warmth, prayer, and whispered knowledge passed from one birth to the next. The central hearth, its fire a fragile promise, was the heart of this circle. Around its glow they shared their scarce resources, a precious handful of dried herbs, a small portion of extra fuel, a carefully mended blanket. These were not mere exchanges, they were profound acts of communal generosity, born of the understanding that individual survival often depended on collective support. Prayers, often whispered and heartfelt, would rise from the circle, offered for a healthy pregnancy, for an easy birth, for protection against illness and evil spirits. These were not formal liturgical prayers, but intimate, personal pleas, imbued with the collective faith and fear of the women, seeking divine mercy for the expectant mother. And crucially, they shared whispered knowledge passed from one birth to the next. This was the ancient lore of midwifery, of herbal remedies, of comforting practices, accumulated over centuries of lived experience. Advice on diet, on managing pain, on recognizing the signs of trouble. These were invaluable lessons, vital for increasing the chances of survival for both mother and child in an age without formal medicine. The psychological impact of this circle was immense. For a pregnant woman grappling with profound physical and emotional burdens, the presence of other women, their shared wisdom, their unspoken empathy offered an invaluable sense of community, a profound antidote to the isolation and despair that winter could bring. Neighbors gather, sharing warmth, prayer, and whispered knowledge passed from one birth to the next. The women's circle was a weird, pervasive, and often comforting ritual for pregnant women in medieval winter, transforming their raw ingenuity into the very means of defying a lethal environment. It was a softly haunting, tender descent into a frozen world, charting the unseen courage of women who carried life through a season built for death forever, tethered to the fragile warmth of shared knowledge and the enduring miracle of life beneath the frost. The midwife's hands, in the brutal, unforgiving grip of a medieval winter, where death was a constant, intimate visitor, the journey of childbirth was one of the most perilous a woman could undertake. In a world devoid of physicians where medical science was almost non-existent, the midwife stood as a crucial, often revered figure, her presence a thin but powerful shield between life and death. The midwife's hands were a profound testament to skill and courage. Rough, cracked, yet steady. Hands that had caught more lives than any noble physician ever will, embodying the quiet strength of survival in a season built for death. Imagine the air inside a small, mud-daubed hut, thick with the pungent aroma of wood smoke, old herbs, and the subtle tang of human effort and fear. The sounds were no longer the gentle murmur of a women's circle. They included the low moans of a woman in labor, the hushed whispers of prayer, and the rhythmic, reassuring voice of the midwife. Candlelight trembling in drafty huts, illuminated faces etched with pain and profound anxiety, focused entirely on the skilled hands that mediated life. The call would come in the deep of night, a frantic, hushed knock on the door, a whispered plea carried on the icy wind. You would rise, your stomach tightening with a familiar dread, grab your warmest cloak, and follow the nervous messenger through the dark, cold village. The hut where the birth was beginning would already be tense, filled with a palpable mixture of pain, fear, and desperate anticipation. Listen to the low moans of the laboring woman, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her body racked by contractions. Hear the hushed whispers of other women gathered, offering prayers, offering comfort, but ultimately helpless witnesses. See the midwife, her face grimly focused, her eyes sharp and constantly assessing, her presence a calm anchor in the midst of profound suffering. Her hands were rough, cracked, yet steady. These were hands hardened by a lifetime of physical labor, calloused by countless tasks. But in the birthing hut, they moved with a surprising delicacy, a profound knowing. They felt the contours of the laboring body, guided the slow descent of the child, and offered support with unwavering confidence. They were instruments of ancient wisdom, honed by generations of lived experience, hands that have caught more lives than any noble physician ever will. The midwife's knowledge was not from books, but from oral tradition, from years of apprenticeship, from countless births witnessed and assisted. She understood the rhythms of the female body, the herbs that could offer comfort or ease labor, the signs of trouble that required desperate intervention. Her remedies were drawn from the earth around her, from the traditions passed down through her lineage. Childbirth in medieval times was a journey fraught with immense danger, infection, hemorrhage, prolonged labor. These were common killers, often claiming both mother and infant. The midwife knew these dangers intimately. She watched for the subtle signs, she made her desperate, often futile interventions, her knowledge the only barrier against a swift, brutal end. Her role was not just physical, it was deeply spiritual. She would murmur incantations, ancient blessings whispered over the smoky air, often blending Christian prayers with older, pagan charms meant to ward off evil spirits, to ensure an easy passage, to bless the new life. Her faith, her quiet strength, her unwavering resolve were as vital as her practical skills. Rough, cracked, yet steady, hands that have caught more lives than any noble physician ever will. The midwife's hands were a pervasive, fundamental reality for pregnant women in medieval winter, transforming their raw ingenuity into the very means of defying a lethal environment. It was a softly haunting, tender descent into a frozen world, charting the unseen courage of women who carried life through a season built for death, forever tethered to the fragile miracle of life beneath the frost and the enduring strength of ancient, knowing hands. Herbs of hope and healing. In the brutal grip of a medieval winter, where sickness spread easily in crowded huts, and the very act of birth was a perilous gamble, medical knowledge was rudimentary, and external aid often non-existent. In this profound vulnerability, peasant women, guided by ancient traditions, turned to the subtle, powerful wisdom of the earth itself. Herbs of hope and healing were a fundamental ritual. Rosemary for pain, chamomile for calm, mugwort for courage. Old magic disguised as care, offering a fragile spiritual shield against unseen ailments and the overwhelming fear of loss. Imagine the air inside a humble hut, thick with the pungent aroma of wood smoke, damp earth, and the subtle tang of various dried herbs, mingled with the pervasive scent of human presence. The sounds were no longer the simple chatter of a women's circle. They included the low murmur of whispered prayers, the soft rustle of dried leaves, and the gentle breathing of a family seeking comfort. Candlelight, trembling in draughty huts, illuminated small bundles of carefully preserved plants, hanging from rafters, their power a quiet promise. The knowledge of herbs was meticulously passed down through generations, often through the women's line, or by the village midwife and healer. These were not just plants, they were believed to possess innate spiritual and medicinal properties, capable of influencing the body, the mind, and the very forces of fate. Gathering and preparing them was a ritualistic act, performed at specific times of the year, under certain moon phases and with particular blessings. Listen to the low, rhythmic grind of dried herbs in a small stone mortar, their leaves slowly releasing their potent aromas. Hear the hushed murmurs of a woman carefully steeping herbs in hot water, preparing a bitter tea for a feverish child or a soothing draught for an anxious mother. See the small bundles of dried plants hanging from rafters, their leaves crisp and fragrant, their presence a constant, tangible reminder of nature's healing power. Rosemary for pain, chamomile for calm, mugwort for courage. Old magic disguised as care. Rosemary, revered for its analgesic properties, might be brewed into a tea to ease the aches of pregnancy or the pains of labor. Chamomile, known for its calming effects, would be given to soothe anxiety, to induce sleep, or to quiet a fretful infant. Mugwort, a powerful herb associated with protection and courage, might be given to an expectant mother to bolster her spirit during the terrifying ordeal of childbirth. But beyond their physical properties, these herbs were imbued with profound spiritual significance. They were believed to ward off evil spirits, to cleanse the air of sickness, to protect against curses, and to invoke the favor of benevolent forces. A pouch of specific herbs might be worn close to the body, tucked under a bed, or placed near the hearth, a tangible charm against unseen dangers. The use of herbs was a desperate act of faith, a blending of practical knowledge with deep-seated superstition. In a world where medical science was virtually non-existent, where a simple infection could be lethal, these humble plants offered the only hope, the only perceived agency against overwhelming suffering. The psychological impact was immense. For a pregnant woman grappling with profound physical and emotional burdens, the herbs offered a sense of control, a belief that she was actively fighting for her own and her child's survival, a tangible source of hope in a world consumed by fear. Rosemary for pain, chamomile for calm, mugwort for courage. Old magic disguised as care. Herbs of hope and healing were a pervasive, fundamental ritual for pregnant women in medieval winter, transforming their raw ingenuity into the very means of defying a lethal environment. It was a softly haunting, tender descent into a frozen world, charting the unseen courage of women who carried life through a season built for death forever, tethered to the fragile warmth of shared knowledge and the enduring miracle of life beneath the frost, a profound secret of ancient folk medicine. In the brutal, terrifying realm of medieval childbirth, where every moment was a perilous dance between life and death, and particularly in the harsh isolation of winter, earthly remedies were few and often futile. In this profound vulnerability, faith became the ultimate recourse. The sound of prayer was a universal, deeply ingrained ritual. When pain begins, there are no screams, only murmurs, not to the doctor, but to God, a collective, desperate plea for divine mercy that filled the humble hut, transforming profound suffering into a sacred act of unwavering belief. Imagine the air inside a small, mud-daubed hut, thick with the pungent aroma of wood smoke, old herbs, and the subtle tang of human effort and fear. The sounds were no longer the gentle murmur of a women's circle. They included the low moans of a woman in labor, the hushed whispers of prayer, and the rhythmic, reassuring voice of the midwife. Candlelight trembling in drafty huts, illuminated faces etched with pain and profound anxiety, focused entirely on the unseen divine power. The call would come in the deep of night, a frantic, hushed knock on the door, a whispered plea carried on the icy wind. You would rise, your stomach tightening with a familiar dread, grab your warmest cloak, and follow the nervous messenger through the dark, cold village. The hut where the birth was beginning would already be tense, filled with a palpable mixture of pain, fear, and desperate anticipation. Listen to the low moans of the laboring woman, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her body racked by contractions, but even in her agony there were no screams, only murmurs. These were prayers whispered through clenched teeth, pleas for strength, for deliverance, for the safe passage of her child. Hear the hushed whispers of other women gathered, family, neighbors, the midwife, their voices joining in a collective chorus of fervent prayer, often repeating familiar invocations, the Pater Noster, the Ave Maria, invocations to the Virgin Mary, to Saint Margaret, patron saint of childbirth. When pain begins, there are no screams, only murmurs. Not to the doctor, but to God. The absence of a doctor, in the modern sense, meant that the ultimate authority, the ultimate hope, rested with the divine. Childbirth was seen as a profoundly spiritual event, a moment when the soul of a new human entered the world, and thus divine intervention was paramount. The belief in the power of prayer was absolute. They prayed for an easy labor, for protection from complications, for a healthy child, for the mother's safe passage through the perils of birth. They prayed for protection against evil spirits, against curses, against any malevolent force that might seek to harm either mother or infant. The air in the hut, thick with wood smoke and human presence, felt heavy with the weight of these prayers. The flickering candlelight casting dancing shadows added to the solemnity of the moment. Each murmured word, each clasped hand, each bowed head was a desperate act of faith, a collective plea for mercy in a world where a simple infection could be lethal, where hemorrhage could claim a life in moments. The psychological impact was immense. For the laboring woman surrounded by the unwavering faith of her community, enveloped in their collective prayers, there was a profound sense of spiritual support, a belief that she was not alone, that God and the saints were listening, fighting for her. When pain begins, there are no screams, only murmurs, not to the doctor, but to God. The sound of prayer was a pervasive, fundamental ritual for pregnant women in medieval winter, transforming the terrifying ordeal of childbirth into a sacred act of unwavering faith. It was a softly haunting, tender descent into a frozen world, charting the unseen courage of women who carried life through a season built for death, forever tethered to the fragile miracle of life beneath the frost and the enduring strength of communal, desperate prayer. The candlelight vigil. In the profound darkness and bone-chilling cold of a medieval winter night, within the cramped confines of a peasant hut where new life struggled to enter the world, time itself seemed to stretch into an agonizing eternity. With the laboring woman fighting for breath and the collective prayers murmuring softly, another vital ritual unfolded, the candlelight vigil. Hours passed. The air smelled of wax and smoke. Then, cutting through the profound stillness, a new cry joined the cold night, marking the profound triumph of life against overwhelming odds, a testament to unwavering human hope. Imagine the air inside the small, mud-daubed hut, thick with the pungent aroma of wood smoke, old herbs, and the subtle tang of human effort and fear, now permeated by the sweet, waxy smell of burning candles. The sounds were no longer just the low moans of a woman in labor. They included the hushed whispers of prayer, the soft rustle of movement, and the profound, almost oppressive silence of deep waiting. Candlelight trembling in drafty huts, illuminated faces etched with pain and profound anxiety, focused entirely on the unfolding miracle. The hours of childbirth were long, arduous, and terrifyingly unpredictable. For those gathered, the midwife, the mother's closest female relatives and friends, it was a period of intense vigilance, a shared burden of anxiety and profound hope. As the darkness deepened and the cold pressed in, precious tallow or beeswax candles would be lit, their flickering flames becoming the focal point of the vigil. Listen to the relentless, soft murmur of whispered prayers, rising and falling, sometimes becoming almost inaudible, sometimes swelling with renewed fervor. Hear the rhythmic ticking of a simple water clock, or the shift of a body, marking the agonizing passage of time. See the small, flickering flames of the candles, bravely pushing back the encompassing darkness, casting dancing shadows on the rough mud brick walls, transforming familiar forms into ghostly, shifting figures. Hours pass. The air smelled of wax and smoke. The candles, slowly consuming themselves, filled the hut with their distinct, waxy aroma, mingling with the wood smoke from the hearth and the increasingly palpable sense of labor. Each candle, a precious commodity, was a symbol of enduring hope, a visible declaration that they would not surrender to the darkness, that they would wait tirelessly for the miracle of new life. The midwife, her face grimly focused, her hands rough but steady, would guide the laboring woman, her voice a low, constant presence of reassurance and instruction. Other women would offer sips of herbal tea, wipe sweat from the mother's brow, or simply hold her hand, their collective presence a source of profound spiritual and emotional support. The cold, despite the fire, would seep into the hut, making the vigil even more arduous. Bodies would shiver, huddle closer, their exhaustion profound. But the focus remained absolute. The new life struggling to emerge, the fragile hope for a healthy birth. And then, if God willed it, a new sound would pierce the profound stillness of the night. A wail, thin, insistent, the raw, beautiful cry of a newborn. A collective gasp, then a deep, shuddering sigh of relief would ripple through the hut. The midwife, her face gleaming with sweat and exhaustion, would cradle the tiny, vulnerable form, carefully cutting the cord, cleaning the infant. A new cry joins the cold night. The candlelight vigil was a pervasive, fundamental ritual for pregnant women in medieval winter, transforming the terrifying ordeal of childbirth into a sacred act of unwavering faith and communal endurance. It was a softly haunting, tender descent into a frozen world, charting the unseen courage of women who carried life through a season built for death, forever tethered to the fragile miracle of life beneath the frost and the enduring strength of human hope, illuminated by the unwavering glow of a flickering candle. The risks of life, the fever, after birth. In the brutal, precarious world of medieval winter, the birth of a child, however miraculous, was never a guarantee of safety. The profound vulnerability of the mother in the aftermath of childbirth was immense, her body weakened, exposed to unseen dangers. The fever after birth was a terrifying, all too common reality. A small infection, a chill, or a dirty cloth could undo everything, transforming the triumph of birth into a rapid descent towards death. Survival was never guaranteed, a constant chilling fear that overshadowed the fragile joy of new life. Imagine the air inside the small, mud-daubed hut, thick with the pungent aroma of wood smoke, old herbs, and the lingering scent of birth, now permeated by the cloying smell of fever and fear. The sounds were no longer the triumphant cry of a newborn. They included the shallow, ragged breathing of the mother, her low moans, the hushed whispers of worried family members, and the persistent crackle of a struggling fire. Candlelight trembling in drafty huts, illuminated faces etched with profound anxiety. The first few days and nights after childbirth were critically dangerous. The mother's body, exhausted by the immense labor, was profoundly weakened. The birthing process itself left her vulnerable to a host of unseen threats, chief among them infection. In a world without understanding of germs, where hygiene was rudimentary and access to clean water limited, infection was a silent, insidious killer. Listen to the shallow, ragged breathing of the mother, her body hot with fever, her skin clammy with sweat, yet shivering uncontrollably. Hear the anxious murmurs of the midwife and the women gathered, their voices low and grim, discussing the ominous signs, the rapid pulse, the dullness in her eyes, the growing weakness. See the new mother, her face flushed, her dreams of nurturing her infant now haunted by the spectre of her own failing health. A small infection, a chill, or a dirty cloth can undo everything. A tiny cut, a tear during birth, could become a pathway for lethal bacteria. The exposure to cold drafts, the lack of warm, clean bedding, could quickly lead to a debilitating chill that worsened into a fever. A cloth, seemingly clean but carrying unseen pathogens, could introduce infection. These were the countless, invisible dangers that turned a moment of triumph into a rapid descent towards death. The fever, once it took hold, could escalate with terrifying speed. The mother's body, already weakened, struggled to fight back. Her milk might dry up, threatening the newborn child's survival. Her delirium could separate her from the reality of her infant, a heartbreaking scene for the family. Survival is never guaranteed. The village healer's herbs and whispered spells, while offering hope and comfort, were often futile against the ravages of systemic infection. The priest's prayers, though fervent, seemed to go unanswered as death, which had been defied in childbirth, now returned for the mother. The psychological toll on the family was immense. To have survived the perils of birth, only to lose the mother to a postpartum fever, was a profound tragedy, a cruel twist of fate that left a newborn orphaned and a family shattered. A small infection, a chill, or a dirty cloth can undo everything. Survival is never guaranteed. The fever after birth was a pervasive, fundamental risk for pregnant women in medieval winter, transforming the fragile miracle of life into a terrifying, often fatal, gamble. It was a softly haunting, tender descent into a frozen world, charting the unseen courage of women who carried life through a season built for death forever, tethered to the profound vulnerability of new mothers and the chilling reality of loss. The churching of women. In the profoundly religious medieval world, where every aspect of life was imbued with spiritual significance, the perilous journey of childbirth was seen as both a miracle and a source of profound ritual impurity. After the immense physical and spiritual ordeal, a new sacred rite awaited the mother, a public declaration of her return to communal life. The churching of women was a fundamental ritual. After 40 days, the mother walked, weak but upright, to thank heaven for sparing her, a profound act of purification and thanksgiving reaffirming her place within the community and the sacred order. Imagine the air thick with the lingering scent of incense, beeswax candles, and the subtle tang of human presence, now permeated by a hushed reverence. The sounds were no longer the low moans of labor. They included the solemn chanting of the priest, the gentle murmur of prayers, and the soft rustle of a woman's clean, if simple, garments. Pale dawn over frostbitten fields illuminated a fragile figure making her way to the village church, a journey of profound significance. The period of 40 days after childbirth was crucial. It mirrored the 40 days of Mary's purification after Christ's birth, and was seen as a time of ritual impurity for the mother, during which she was typically confined to her home, allowed little contact beyond her closest family and the midwife. This was a period of rest, but also of spiritual isolation, a time for her body to heal and for her to be ritually cleansed before rejoining the community. Listen to the gentle murmur of welcoming voices from the small congregation, their tones soft, respectful, as the mother approached the church door. Hear the solemn chanting of the priest, his voice clear and resonant as he performed the ritual of purification. See the mother, her face pale and drawn, still weak from the ordeal of birth, but upright and determined, carrying her precious newborn, making her way towards the altar. After 40 days, the mother walks, weak but upright, to thank heaven for sparing her. This was the moment of her return to full communal and spiritual life. Dressed in her cleanest, if simple clothes, often veiled, she would approach the church door where the priest would meet her. He would sprinkle her with holy water, recite specific prayers of purification and thanksgiving, and then lead her into the church, often up to the altar. Here she would offer a small token of thanksgiving, a candle, a coin, or a humble offering of bread, and receive a blessing from the priest. This act was not only a purification for the mother, but also a consecration of the child, a public declaration of its entry into the Christian community. It affirmed the mother's return to her role as a full member of society, her recovery from the perilous state of childbirth. The psychological impact was immense. For the mother, who had faced death and returned, it was a profound moment of gratitude and relief. It was a public acknowledgement of her immense courage, her successful journey through the perils of birth, and her renewed spiritual standing. It reintegrated her into the social and spiritual fabric of the village, ending her period of isolation. The churching of women was a pervasive, fundamental ritual for pregnant women in medieval winter, transforming the terrifying ordeal of childbirth into a sacred act of purification and thanksgiving. It was a softly haunting, tender descent into a frozen world, charting the unseen courage of women who carried life through a season built for death, forever tethered to the fragile miracle of life beneath the frost and the enduring strength of faith and communal affirmation. In the brutal, unforgiving world of medieval winter, where sickness spread easily and the perils of childbirth were immense, formal medicine was often absent, and the village priest's prayers, though heartfelt, seemed to go unanswered. In this profound vulnerability, the healer, often a woman, stood as a crucial figure, her knowledge a thin but powerful shield against suffering and death. The healer's secrets were a profound repository of ancient wisdom. Not all cures came from prayer. Some came from quiet rebellion against ignorance, passed down through whispers, often blurring the lines between herbal lawfolk magic and a desperate empirical understanding of the human body. Imagine the air inside a humble hut, thick with the pungent aroma of wood smoke, old herbs, and the subtle tang of human effort and fear. The sounds were no longer the low moans of labor or prayer. They included the rhythmic grind of herbs in a mortar, the gentle murmur of instruction, and the hushed voices of those seeking solace. Candlelight trembling in draughty huts illuminated small bundles of carefully preserved plants, hanging from rafters, their power a quiet, often mysterious promise. The healer, often the village midwife or a wise woman, was the repository of generations of accumulated knowledge about the natural world and the human body. Her wisdom was not derived from books or universities, but from keen observation, trial and error, and an intimate understanding of local plants and their properties. She was often a respected yet sometimes feared figure, walking a fine line between accepted practice and accusations of witchcraft. Listen to the low, rhythmic grind of dried herbs in a small stone mortar, their leaves slowly releasing their potent aromas. Hear the hushed murmurs of the healer, carefully dispensing advice, instructing on dosage, explaining the properties of a bitter tea for fever or a soothing poultice for a swelling. See her hands, rough and cracked, yet moving with a surprising delicacy, preparing a remedy, her eyes sharp and knowing. While she respected the church and its power of prayer, the healer operated in a pragmatic world where immediate physical ailments demanded practical, earthly interventions. Her methods were often empirical, based on what had been observed to work, rather than purely theological dogma. This practical knowledge, often dismissed as old wives' tales or even magic by those in power, was in fact the most effective form of medicine available to the medieval peasant. Her secrets included an extensive knowledge of medicinal herbs, rosemary for pain, chamomile for calm, mugwort for courage, willow bark for fever, a natural source of salicylic acid. She knew how to prepare salves for wounds, tinctures for stomach ailments, and specific remedies for the complications of childbirth. She understood the importance of cleanliness, however rudimentary, and the value of rest and warmth. But her remedies often blurred the lines with magic and superstition. She might prescribe not only a herbal draught, but also a specific charm to be worn, an incantation to be whispered, or a ritual to be performed, believing that spiritual forces played an equal role in health and illness. This blend of the natural and supernatural was the accepted reality of peasant healing. The psychological impact was immense. For those suffering, or for pregnant women facing the perils of birth, the healer offered a tangible sense of agency, a belief that something could be done, that their suffering was not entirely arbitrary. Her presence, her knowledge, her quiet confidence offered profound hope. Not all cures come from prayer. Some come from quiet rebellion against ignorance. The healer's secrets were a pervasive, fundamental ritual for pregnant women in medieval winter, transforming their raw ingenuity into the very means of defying a lethal environment. It was a softly haunting, tender descent into a frozen world, charting the unseen courage of women who carried life through a season built for death, forever tethered to the fragile miracle of life beneath the frost and the enduring strength of ancient knowing hands, fighting death with wisdom and quiet defiance. Not all cures come from prayer. Some come from quiet rebellion against ignorance, the silent loss. In the brutal, unforgiving world of medieval winter, where every human life was precious yet profoundly precarious, the triumph of a live birth was often tragically short-lived. For the peasant family, the silent loss was a profound, heartbreaking reality. When the baby doesn't cry, there are no funerals, only a wooden cross. And silence, a chilling testament to the immense fragility of new life, the crushing weight of grief, and the enduring, profound sense of loss that permeated a world where death was an intimate, constant visitor. Imagine the air inside a small, mud-daubed hut, thick with the pungent aroma of wood smoke, old herbs, and the subtle tang of human fear, now permeated by the profound stillness of sorrow. The sounds were no longer the triumphant cry of a newborn. They included the hushed whispers of despair, the low sobs of a grieving mother, and the profound, almost eerie silence that settled over the family. Candlelight trembling in draughty huts, illuminated faces etched with profound, unbearable grief. The perils of childbirth in medieval times were immense, not just for the mother, but for the newborn. High infant mortality was an accepted, tragic reality, driven by malnutrition, unsanitary conditions, lack of medical knowledge, and the sheer vulnerability of a new human life. The period immediately following birth was critically dangerous. Listen to the hushed, anxious murmurs of the midwife and the women gathered, their voices low and grim, as they struggled to bring life to the tiny, still form. Hear the agonizing silence that follows their efforts, broken only by a mother's soft sob, a father's choked gasp, as the chilling truth settled. The baby hadn't cried. See the tiny, motionless body wrapped in a simple cloth, its small face serene, yet profoundly, heartbreakingly still. When the baby doesn't cry, there are no funerals. The loss of a newborn, particularly within the first few hours or days of life, was a common occurrence, so common that it often lacked the full, formal rituals of death afforded to older children or adults. There would be no solemn church service, no procession to the churchyard, no communal mourning. The grief was intensely personal, often private, shared only within the immediate family. Only a wooden cross and silence. The infant would be given a simple, hurried burial, often in an unmarked grave or a small plot near the cottage. A crude wooden cross fashioned by the father's trembling hands might be placed over the tiny mound of earth, a silent testament to a life too brief to fully register in the formal records of the church. The profound silence that followed was a heavy, suffocating blanket of grief and unspoken sorrow. The psychological toll on the mother was immense. To have endured the perils of pregnancy, the agony of childbirth, only to lose the new life, was a profound, crushing tragedy. Her body, already weakened, would now also bear the immense emotional burden of this silent loss, often leading to deep depression, further weakening her resilience against the winter's hardships. The family, too, would grapple with this sorrow. The hopes and dreams attached to the new life, however fragile, were suddenly extinguished, leaving a gaping void. The future, which had seemed to promise new life, now felt dimmer, colder, profoundly marked by absence. When the baby doesn't cry, there are no funerals, only a wooden cross and silence. The silent loss was a pervasive, fundamental risk for pregnant women in medieval winter, transforming the fragile miracle of life into a terrifying, often fatal, gamble. It was a softly haunting, tender descent into a frozen world, charting the unseen courage of women who carried life through a season built for death, forever, tethered to the profound vulnerability of new life and the chilling reality of unspoken, enduring grief beneath the frost. The widow's winter. In the brutal, unforgiving world of medieval winter, where death was an intimate, constant visitor, a particular tragedy befell many women: the widow's winter. While male mortality was high, especially in war or from accidents, an epidemic or famine could just as swiftly claim a husband, leaving his wife and children profoundly vulnerable. Many women endured without their partners, working the hearth, raising children alone through the endless frost, confronting a devastating double burden of grief and immense practical hardship, a chilling testament to their quiet, unyielding strength. Imagine the air inside a small, mud-daubed hut, thick with the pungent aroma of wood smoke, old herbs, and the subtle tang of human presence, now permeated by the profound stillness of absence. The sounds were no longer the simple chatter of a living family. They included the low murmur of unspoken grief, the quiet cries of children, and the soft rustle of a lone woman moving through her endless chores. Candlelight trembling in drafty huts illuminated a single face, etched with profound sorrow and grim determination. The loss of a husband, particularly during the harsh winter months, was a catastrophic blow. He was the primary laborer in the fields, the gatherer of firewood, the protector against bandits and wild animals. His absence left an immense gaping void, not just emotionally, but in the practical machinery of daily survival. Listen to the low sobs of a woman alone in her hut, her grief profound but often suppressed, for there was little time for outward lamentation. Hear the quiet cries of her children, sensing the profound shift in their world, their small voices amplifying her solitude. See the widow, her face pale and drawn, her hands rough and chapped, trying to manage tasks once shared, her strength slowly ebbing under the immense burden. Many women endure without their partners, working the hearth, raising children alone through the endless frost. The burden of labor became immense. She had to tend the small field, haul precious firewood through deep snow, fetch water from the frozen well, maintain the fragile hut, and, crucially, keep the fire burning, a task once shared with a strong man. Her body, already weakened by chronic malnutrition, the demands of childbirth, and the pervasive cold, was pushed to its absolute limits. The emotional isolation was as devastating as the practical challenges. Even with neighbors who offered what little support they could, the intimacy of a partner, the shared burden of raising children, the comfort of companionship, these were gone. She would sit by her hearth in the long, dark nights, surrounded by the ghosts of her lost husband, his voice echoing in her memory, his absence a tangible presence that twisted her heart with a profound, unbearable sorrow. Her children, now fatherless, depended entirely on her. Their small lives, already precarious, were now made even more vulnerable. She fought relentlessly for their survival, her love for them a fierce, unwavering flame against the encroaching cold and despair. The churching of women, a ritual of purification after birth, was now performed by women who carried this silent grief, walking weak but upright, to thank heaven for sparing them, often alone, facing a daunting future. Many women endure without their partners, working the hearth, raising children alone through the endless frost. The widow's winter was a pervasive, fundamental risk for women in medieval times, transforming their raw ingenuity into the very means of defying a lethal environment. It was a softly haunting, tender descent into a frozen world, charting the unseen courage of women who carried life through a season, built for death forever, tethered to the profound vulnerability of new life and the chilling reality of solitary, enduring strength beneath the frost. Endurance and faith, the breath in the cold. In the bone-chilling depths of a medieval winter, when the cold permeated every fibre of existence and death was an intimate, constant visitor, the very act of breathing became a profound daily affirmation of life. For a pregnant woman whose body harboured a new, fragile soul, the breath in the cold was a sacred rhythm. Each exhale felt sacred, proof that both mother and child were still alive, a visible ephemeral testament to their shared endurance, a profound act of faith in a season built for death. Imagine the air inside the hut thick with the earthy scent of mud brick, the pervasive aroma of wood smoke and the subtle tang of human presence, now permeated by a profound chill that clung to every surface. The sounds were no longer the simple crackle of a thriving fire. They included the soft, rhythmic breathing of a family huddled close, the gentle rustle of straw, and the subtle, internal murmur of your own weary body. Candlelight trembling in draughty huts illuminated faces etched with weariness, but softened by profound hope. You would be roused from a shallow, fitful sleep, perhaps by the cold itself, or by an internal clock, a primal awareness that the turning of the night was at hand. The hut would still be in near absolute darkness, the embers of the hearth having dwindled to their lowest, most precarious point. Your body, heavy with the growing life within, felt every nuance of the pervasive cold with an almost unbearable intensity. Listen to your own ragged breathing, the air sharp and cold, turning white as your breath fogs the air with every exhale. Hear the soft, rhythmic breathing of your partner beside you, the gentle sighs of your sleeping children. And then your focus would turn inward, to the quiet, subtle movements of the life within you. Each exhale, a visible cloud, became a prayer, a profound communication with the external world. Each exhale feels sacred, proof that both mother and child are still alive. In the lethal cold, where hypothermia could claim life silently, imperceptibly, the visible cloud of your breath was a constant, tangible affirmation of warmth, of life, of endurance. It was a daily miracle, a small but profound victory against the cold's insidious grip. The warmth it carried, however fleeting, was a testament to the internal furnace, tirelessly working to protect two fragile lives. For a pregnant woman, this affirmation was doubly significant. It was not just proof of her own continued existence, but, more crucially, a silent prayer, a hopeful sign that the child within her was also breathing, also fighting, also clinging to life. Each visible breath was a moment of profound gratitude, a fleeting reassurance against the constant, gnawing fear of loss. The physiological demands on the body were immense: to maintain core temperature, to oxygenate two bloodstreams, to generate enough heat in extreme cold. This was a ceaseless, invisible struggle. The visible breath was a tangible manifestation of this profound internal battle, a testament to the body's unwavering will to protect and sustain life. The spiritual significance was equally profound. Breath, in many medieval beliefs, was intimately linked to the soul, to the divine spark of life. To see one breath in the cold air was to witness a visible manifestation of that sacred life force, a profound connection to the divine, a moment of unwavering faith in a world consumed by doubt. Each exhale feels sacred, proof that both mother and child are still alive. The breath in the cold was a pervasive, fundamental reality for pregnant women in medieval winter, transforming their raw ingenuity into the very means of defying a lethal environment. It was a softly haunting, tender descent into a frozen world, charting the unseen courage of women who carried life through a season built for death, forever tethered to the fragile miracle of life beneath the frost, and the enduring strength of faith and the sacred rhythm of shared breath. The memory of the cold. As the brutal grip of medieval winter finally receded, giving way to the gentle rhythms of spring and the vibrant promise of new life, the physical landscape thawed. But for those who had endured, for the mothers who had carried life through its darkest depths, the memory of that cataclysmic cold was indelible. The memory of the cold was a persistent, haunting presence. Even years later, mothers remembered that winter. The hunger, the fear, the miracle of survival, a profound, unwritten chronicle etched into their very souls, shaping their lives forever. Imagine the air, crisp and clean, thick with the sweet scent of blooming wildflowers, fresh grass, and the pervasive aroma of wood smoke, mingled with the low hum of ancestral stories. The sounds are no longer the mournful howl of the wind. They include the rhythmic beat of a tribal drum, the low murmur of elders recounting ancient tales, and the soft strains of ceremonial songs, all echoing the profound lessons of past winters. Pale dawn over frostbitten fields, now verdant with new growth, carries the subtle weight of memory. The physical scars of that winter might slowly fade, the frostbite marks on fingers or toes, the gauntness of their faces. But the internal scars, the profound memory of relentless cold, of gnawing hunger, of pervasive fear, would never truly disappear. It became a part of their identity, a defining experience that shaped their understanding of the world, of life, and of their own resilience. Listen to the low, rhythmic voice of a mother recounting the winter of the long darkness, her words imbued with a solemn gravity. Hear the hushed gasps of children, their eyes wide, trying to grasp the concept of such unimaginable cold, such profound darkness, such overwhelming scarcity from a world they had never known. See the mothers, their faces etched with the wisdom of countless encounters with winter's brutality, their expressions distant, fixed on a memory that felt as real as the present. Mothers remembered that winter, the hunger, the fear, the miracle of survival. The hunger, a persistent, gnawing ache that had tormented their bodies and minds for months, was a memory that shaped their relationship with food forever. Every harvest, every meal, however abundant, would be consumed with a subtle reverence, an underlying awareness of its preciousness, the fear a constant companion of losing a child to the cold, to hunger, to illness, was a memory that never truly vanished. It instilled a fierce, unwavering protectiveness, a constant vigilance over their children's well-being. The knowledge of death's intimate presence, its capacity to snatch life without warning, etched a profound sense of fragility into their souls. Yet, amidst the hunger and the fear, there was also the profound miracle of survival. The memory of a child's first cry, of its first smile, of the fire's warmth, of the communal huddle. These were the counterpoints to the misery, reminding them of the strength of love, of family, of unwavering hope. This profound memory became a vital cultural legacy. It shaped their customs, their rituals, their stories, and their prayers. It reinforced the importance of meticulous preparation for winter, of communal support, of unwavering faith. It was a constant lesson, passed down through generations, ensuring that the wisdom of survival was never forgotten. Even years later, mothers remembered that winter, the hunger, the fear, the miracle of survival. The memory of the cold was a pervasive, fundamental reality for pregnant women in medieval times, transforming their raw ingenuity into the very means of ensuring their legacy. It was a softly haunting, tender descent into a frozen world, charting the unseen courage of women who carried life through a season built for death forever, tethered to the fragile miracle of life beneath the frost and the enduring strength of profound, unforgettable memory. The passing of wisdom. As the brutal medieval winter finally receded, leaving behind scars on the land and indelible marks on the human spirit, the lessons learned in that crucible of cold were too vital to be forgotten. The passing of wisdom was a sacred, unwritten ritual. Daughters learned the same rituals, the same prayers. For when their own winters come meticulously, transmitting generations of accumulated knowledge, ingenuity, and spiritual resilience, ensuring the continuity of life against the relentless, cyclical threats of nature. Imagine the air, crisp and clean, thick with the sweet scent of blooming wildflowers, fresh grass, and the pervasive aroma of wood smoke, mingled with the low hum of ancestral stories. The sounds are no longer the mournful howl of the wind. They include the gentle murmur of a mother's voice, patiently instructing her daughter, the soft rustle of prepared herbs and the rhythmic beat of a tribal drum echoing the profound lessons of past winters. Pale dawn over frostbitten fields now verdant with new growth carries the subtle weight of memory and the promise of continuity. The mothers who had endured that winter, who had carried life through its darkest depths, became the living libraries of their community. Their bodies, though perhaps frail, held the wisdom of generations, etched into their gnarled hands and knowing eyes. They had faced famines, blizzards, and the insidious creep of cold, and they had learned the intricate, subtle ways to defy death by freezing, and crucially, to bring new life safely through the winter. Listen to the low, rhythmic voice of a mother patiently demonstrating how to arrange a thin blanket, how to tuck it just so to create a tight, insulating pocket against the cold for an infant. Hear the gentle guidance correcting a daughter's clumsy attempt to pile straw, showing her how to maximize its insulating power. See the young daughters, their faces rapt, their eyes wide, absorbing every detail, understanding implicitly the profound importance of these lessons. Daughters learn the same rituals, the same prayers, for when their own winters come. These were practical lessons. The optimal location for the cradle near the hearth, the herbs to gather and prepare for childbirth pain and postpartum fever, the importance of communal huddling for shared heat, the signs of frostbite, the techniques for banking the fire. This deep understanding of their environment, meticulously transmitted, was the key to their continued existence. But the passing of wisdom extended beyond the purely practical. It encompassed the spiritual beliefs, the myths, the stories that explained their world, their relationship with God, and their unwavering faith in the face of suffering. The prayers before sleep, the charms against the cold, the rituals of churching. These were all carefully taught, ensuring the continuity of their spiritual resilience. Daughters learn the same rituals, the same prayers, for when their own winters come. The passing of wisdom was a weird, pervasive, and profoundly comforting aspect of daily life for medieval peasants. It was an unspoken code, a constant, pervasive presence that shaped their spiritual lives, deepened their cultural memory, and reminded them that their very existence was bound by tradition, by shared knowledge, and by the profound ingenuity of those who had endured countless cold nights under vast, frozen skies, forever building their resilience against freezing dead, ensuring the torch of life was passed to another generation. The quiet power of women. As the brutal medieval winter finally receded, leaving behind scars on the land and indelible marks on the human spirit, the profound resilience of humanity was nowhere more evident than in the quiet strength of its women. No battles fought, no crowns worn. Yet they kept humanity alive one birth at a time, a profound unwritten testament to their unseen courage, their unwavering nurturing, and their central, indispensable role in the continuity of the species, echoing through centuries, defining the very essence of medieval life. Imagine the air, crisp and clean, thick with the sweet scent of blooming wildflowers, fresh grass, and the pervasive aroma of wood smoke mingled with the low hum of ancestral stories. The sounds are no longer the mournful howl of the wind. They include the gentle murmur of a mother's lullaby, the soft rustle of prepared herbs, and the rhythmic beat of a distant tribal drum, echoing the profound lessons of past winters. Pale dawn over frostbitten fields, now verdant with new growth, carries the subtle weight of memory and the promise of continuity. In a patriarchal medieval society where men were celebrated for their martial prowess and their dominion over the land, the power of women was often unseen, unwritten, operating in the domestic sphere, in the shadows of the hearth. Yet it was in this realm that the true battle for humanity as survival in winter was often fought and won. Listen to the gentle murmur of a mother soothing her child in the dead of night, her voice a soft, unwavering beacon against the cold and fear. Hear the low, rhythmic grind of herbs in a mortar, prepared by the midwife's knowing hands, a desperate attempt to ward off illness and pain. See the circle of women gathered around a laboring mother, their faces etched with empathy and courage, their whispered prayers and shared knowledge guiding a new life into the world. No battles fought, no crowns worn, yet they kept humanity alive, one birth at a time. The immense physiological burden of pregnancy, carried through months of gnawing hunger and pervasive cold, was an act of profound courage. The perilous journey of childbirth, often ending in tragedy, was faced with unwavering determination, their bodies pushed to the absolute limits of endurance. Beyond childbirth, women were the primary caregivers, nurturing infants, tending to the sick, managing the meager household resources. They banked the fires, prepared the thin gruel, mended the rough clothing, ensuring that every precious calorie, every ounce of warmth, was meticulously conserved. Their relentless, often unnoticed, labor was essential for the survival of the family. They were the custodians of vital knowledge, the healing properties of herbs, the art of midwifery, the subtle tricks of warmth, the ancestral stories and prayers. This knowledge, passed down from mother to daughter, was the unwritten curriculum of survival, ensuring that future generations would possess the wisdom needed to defy the deadly grip of winter. No battles fought, no crowns worn, yet they kept humanity alive, one birth at a time. The quiet power of women was a weird, pervasive, and profoundly comforting aspect of daily life for medieval peasants. It was an unspoken code, a constant, pervasive presence that shaped their spiritual lives, deepened their cultural memory, and reminded them that their very existence was bound by tradition, by shared knowledge, and by the profound ingenuity of those who had endured countless cold nights under vast, frozen skies, forever building their resilience against freezing dead, ensuring the torch of life was passed to another generation. The fire that endured. As the brutal medieval winter finally receded, leaving behind scars on the land and indelible marks on the human spirit, the ultimate triumph was not merely the coming of spring, but the continuation of life itself. The fire that endured was a profound, unshakable reality. a single ember carried from one hearth to another. Warmth handed down through generations, a silent, ceaseless act of cultural transmission, ensuring that humanity's most vital ally against the cold was never lost, echoing through centuries, defining the very essence of medieval life. Imagine the air, crisp and clean, thick with the sweet scent of blooming wildflowers, fresh grass, and the pervasive aroma of wood smoke, mingled with the low hum of ancestral stories. The sounds are no longer the mournful howl of the wind. They include the gentle murmur of a mother's lullaby, the soft rustle of prepared herbs, and the rhythmic beat of a distant tribal drum, all echoing the profound lessons of past winters. Pale dawn over frostbitten fields, now verdant with new growth, carries the subtle weight of memory and the promise of continuity. The fire, humanity's first great discovery, was its most precious possession in the Ice Age, and, in a medieval winter, it remained indispensable. Its warmth cooked food, protected against predators, and battled the lethal cold. To lose it, to allow the embers to die completely, was a catastrophic failure, threatening the very survival of the family. Listen to the low, rhythmic voice of an elder recounting the winter of the long darkness, his words imbued with a solemn gravity, always emphasizing the preciousness of fire. Hear the hushed instructions from a mother to her daughter, teaching her the meticulous art of banking the fire, of preserving the embers beneath an ash blanket, of knowing just how to coax a spark back to life. See the gentle transfer of a small, glowing coal, wrapped in dry leaves or bark, from one hearth to another, a profoundly symbolic act of shared warmth and communal resilience. A single ember carried from one hearth to another. Warmth handed down through generations. This was a direct, tangible form of cultural transmission, ensuring that the life-giving flame, once so painstakingly wrested from nature, was never lost. If a family's fire died, a neighbor would offer a precious ember from their own hearth, a profound act of communal solidarity, binding the village in shared survival. This act of passing fire from generation to generation, from hearth to hearth, was more than just a practical exchange. It was a profound spiritual ritual. It symbolized the continuity of life, the resilience of the human spirit, the enduring power of community. The flame represented their shared history, their collective struggles, and their unwavering hope for the future. The memory of its importance, of the constant vigilance required to maintain it, was deeply ingrained. It shaped their daily rituals, their architecture, the central hearth, their social interactions, and their spiritual beliefs. The fire became a symbol of home, of family, of life itself. Having witnessed countless brutal medieval winters, countless struggles for life on the frozen plains, now cast its first hesitant light on another dawn, a profound truth emerged. The enduring legacy of survival was not merely the strength of men in battle or the ingenuity of engineers, but the quiet, relentless courage of women. Every life that walks the earth was once carried through cold, fear, and faith. The Mother of Winter embodies this. The world owes its warmth to them, a profound, unwritten testament to their unseen heroism, their unwavering nurturing, and their central, indispensable role in the continuity of humanity, echoing through centuries, defining the very essence of medieval life. Imagine the air, crisp and clean, thick with the subtle scent of new growth, damp earth, and the pervasive aroma of wood smoke, mingled with the low hum of ancestral stories. The sounds are no longer the mournful howl of the wind. They include the rhythmic beat of a tribal drum, the low murmur of elders recounting ancient tales, and the soft strains of ceremonial songs, all echoing the profound lessons of past winters. pale dawn over frostbitten fields now verdant with new growth carries the subtle weight of memory and the promise of continuity. The story of humanity's survival through the medieval winters is inextricably linked to the strength and endurance of its women. They faced not just the cold, the hunger, and the threat of illness, but the immense physiological burden of pregnancy and childbirth, often in the most extreme, life-threatening conditions. Their resilience was truly extraordinary. Listen to the gentle murmur of a mother soothing her child in the dead of night, her voice a soft, unwavering beacon against the cold and fear. Hear the low, rhythmic grind of herbs in a mortar, prepared by the midwife's knowing hands, a desperate attempt to ward off illness and pain. See the circle of women gathered around a laboring mother, their faces etched with empathy and courage, their whispered prayers and shared knowledge guiding a new life into the world. Every life that walks the earth was once carried through cold, fear, and faith. The women endured months of gnawing hunger and pervasive cold while nurturing new life within them. They faced the terrifying perils of childbirth with profound courage, often without any medical aid, risking their own lives for the sake of their child. Their bodies were truly the vessels of humanity's future, bearing the ultimate responsibility for its continuation. Beyond childbirth, women were the primary caregivers, nurturing infants, tending to the sick, managing the meager household resources. They were the hearth keepers, the food preparers, the cloth menders, ensuring that every precious calorie, every ounce of warmth, was meticulously conserved. Their relentless, often unnoticed labor was essential for the survival of the family. They were the custodians of vital knowledge, the healing properties of herbs, the art of midwifery, the subtle tricks of warmth, the ancestral stories and prayers. This wisdom, passed down from mother to daughter, was the unwritten curriculum of survival, ensuring that future generations would possess the strength needed to defy the deadly grip of winter. The world owes its warmth to them. The profound, quiet power of women, their fierce love, their unwavering resilience, their capacity to transform misery into intimacy, grief into hope, was the very bedrock upon which medieval society, battered by winter, ultimately rested. They were the silent heroes, the indispensable force that kept humanity alive, one birth at a time. Every life that walks the earth was once carried through cold, fear, and faith. The Mother of Winter is a pervasive, fundamental reality, transforming their raw ingenuity into an enduring legacy that defines our modern existence. It is a softly haunting, tender descent into a frozen world, charting the unseen courage of women who carried life through a season built for death, forever tethered to the fragile miracle of life beneath the frost and the profound strength of their unwavering spirit, ensuring that the warmth of humanity, against all odds, continued to bloom.